I'm Hahnel. I run Figshare. Figshare is a platform for open research data. So we have lots of people sharing videos, data sets, posters, papers, everything, every research output from academia. So Figshare got started back in 2011. I was an academic. I was doing my PhD at Imperial College in stem cell biology. And academia is super, super competitive. So I wanted to make all of my research outputs available. I just spent my weekend doing a video of some cells moving from one side of the screen to the other. And I wanted to get credit for that. It was all selfish to begin with and all based on my ego, which is based on the fact there's a hyper-competitive environment. And I wanted to have more citations, more impact than everybody else I was going up against. So I just started making my videos, the data sets that I had available online, things that didn't fit into the normal, the traditional publishing workflows. And so I started making them available online on something called Figshare, opened it up to everybody else. Other people started uploading stuff, making content available in that way. And the thing that separates us from everybody else right now is largely to do with the fact that we were the first people in this space at a time when the politics and the rules around academia started changing. So as I said, Figshare began because to solve a problem that I had. But actually, the problem it's going on to solve has changed a lot in the way that the society and academia views this because of governance and because of legal requirements. And so we were just very well positioned to take advantage of providing a service to all these people that needed it. We've since had lots of clones come along, and so we have a bigger team with more developers and more experience in the market, which is really helping us separate ourselves from others at the moment. Due to a lot of technological advances recently with Skype, even my mum uses Skype, and FaceTime and things like this, it means that you can communicate across the globe a lot easier, which means that you don't really sleep, but on the other hand, it means you can have people distributed in interesting markets. And one of the things we have there is we have two offices, one in London and one in a town called Iași in Romania. And that came about because when we first were pre-funding, we have funding from a company called Digital Science. Pre-funding, we got a little bit of money, and I got one of my friends who happens to live in Romania to be the lead developer on the proof of concept. Well, then when we secured funding, the project was going well, he knew a few friends, and so the business started up on that side, which at the time seemed like a good idea because I was the only one London-based. Now, as both teams have grown up, it works really, really well. There's a 2-hour time difference. You can be quite flexible with people's timings, and everybody on that team can communicate with everybody in the London office. Everybody in the London office can talk to everybody in the US who's doing sales for us, or in Australia where we have people as well. So it's really an easy time to be globally distributed and to touch on. At the moment, we're only focusing on English language speaking countries. Or Western Europe, which a lot of academia is in English. But in terms of scaling up fast as a startup, it's super easy to do because of technologies like Slack, like Skype or Google Hangouts to have these meetings at any time of the day. In the past 20 years, there's been an interesting change in academia where people said, previously the best way to disseminate academic content was in the form of a PDF, a 6-page, 10-page document explaining all of the research that had been done. And that still is the greatest summary, the context behind the research that's been done. And so the first thing that's changed is the way in which the business model around publishing works. So there's a big change with open access, which means the authors pay as opposed to the library pays, which is very interesting for who publishers need to market to and what have you. But then the funders went one step further and they said, if we're paying you to do this research, you have to make all of the papers openly available so everybody anywhere can read them. But also, we live in a very digital age, and when I was doing my PhD, as I mentioned, there was lots of data sets, lots of video, lots of digital research outputs that didn't fit into this practice. And so now, the funders, you can understand why the funders are saying this. They fund billions of dollars of research every year, and they're saying, we want the biggest return on investment in that. We want it to be able to build on top of what's been done before, stand on the shoulders of giants and all of these things, and we want to move further faster. And don't get me wrong, academia works. We still get cures for drugs. These things happen. The biggest change is with the power of the internet, with power of linked open data and what have you. The idea is, can we see some of these correlations earlier and then have the experts look at whether they're causative? And so you can really move the bar further faster. On the one hand, you might think that being in the right space at the right time when the funders are saying, you need to make all of your data openly available somewhere, and we're a company where you can make your data openly available somewhere, that's perfect. And it is, in some sense, it's helped a lot with the way that the product has grown. But on the other hand, working in a global environment, there's very different legalities in different jurisdictions. So there's this big thing around data sovereignty, which is the data can't leave the country that it's produced in and things like this. The best example of that is Canada, who say the data can live anywhere as long as it's not America. And it does shape your timeline and your product roadmap, because you have to fit in all of these different nuanced workflows that you didn't think about previously, maybe. But at the same time, again, the ability to work in this environment today is something you couldn't have done before cloud. We couldn't have started a server farm in every country we wanted to work in, because the cost to get it started would just be non-tenable. But through things like Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, things like this, we can actually distribute our infrastructure very easily. So we have our developers who can push changes in our office in Romania, and it can affect different workflows throughout the world, which makes it very scalable, but you just need to do the upfront work at the beginning to make sure that you can make everything scalable in that manner. So in terms of security, one of the most interesting things that's in our space is the idea that it's a new space. So we're talking about genetic material, we're talking about people's genomes, and because the technology is moving faster than legal documentation, surprise, surprise, we're getting to the point where we're doing things, or researchers are doing things, and the legalities are a bit grey. So can you make human genomes available online? The people are anonymized, but at the same time, in 5 years, you might be able to identify that person. You might be able to tell every medical trait they have about them, refuse them insurance, etc., etc. So there's a few legal grey areas, but the problem is that we can't address them. They're a much bigger problem than us as a software company of 30 people can address. So we just try and make sure that our terms and conditions apply to all of these different areas, which in itself causes problems, because in much the way that Instagram got in trouble for saying we own your photos, we have a thing that is, we do not own your research data. Your research data is yours and you license it how you want. We are just a service layer. But then the idea of being a commercial company in a space that's been burnt by commercial companies causes this, you need to build up a high level of trust with the researchers here before they're even sharing the genetic data. So the trust one is a hard one. The good thing about trust is the longer you're in a space and repeating the same message, which hasn't changed since day one, since you were an academic yourself, people start to believe you. That's really good. It's not great if you're a year into this. It's okay if you're a year into this because you just learn the questions that people continually ask, and you know that you have to come up with an answer for this, which actually has made being a commercial company quite a bonus in this space, because a lot of our competitors or a lot of the other people in this space are grant-supported academic projects, and they focus on making it cool and fancy and do nice things. That's exactly where we started, but then at the point in which we started having to engage with clients and having some kind of legal requirements, our investment company, our incubator, made sure that we focused on scalability, on legal compliance, on all of these hard questions that nobody wants to answer. We made sure that we ticked all of those boxes, and it took a hell of a long time. It's still going to take a hell of a long time. But at the same time, if we hadn't have done that, then we wouldn't be able to answer the hard questions which build the trust. So it's kind of a catch-22, but you can't ignore any of these hard questions because they won't go away. In terms of competitive landscape, as I mentioned before, it was good fortune that we were the first ones operating in this space. Many people have had this idea before. It's just that the alignment of technologies, I mentioned cloud, and we have people thinking about data in an academic sense. There's big organizations like data sites who help us with this. So it was the right time and the right place for a lot of things to align. Since then, we work with institutions, and because it's a new space and because universities are going to have to do something in this space, obviously we're getting people doing what we do. It's nice because it kind of verifies that it's a good idea. When you have companies like Elsevier building Figshare clones, it's reassuring that you're on the right path. At the same time, you've got this worry at the back of your mind that they can throw 100 people at it and move a lot further faster. They are an interesting case in that they have, when it comes to trust, they're probably one of the companies who've burned a lot of bridges, whereas a lot of the other side of this, which is companies coming out of CERN, and again out of the academic space, and again in perhaps a not-for-profit space, are naturally seen as a better fit, even if the product might not be as good. So we just let the product do the talking. Execution of ideas is the most important thing that we do. And when it all comes down to it, we're a service provider. And if somebody needs a service, we say this is what we do. And it's up to them whether they go with us or whether they go with someone else. Of course, being a new space, the other thing that could be interesting competitively going forward is people trying to do things faster and cheaper. So you could outsource a lot of this stuff to developing nations. The interesting thing about the Figshare office is it's not an outsourced office, it's a Figshare office. They work on Figshare, that's their job. Nobody is outsourced, that's where we work. And I think that's important because in trying to do things cheaper, by distributing things, by not having a joined up approach and having people doing, contract work, I think it's a very hard space to be in to do that kind of thing. For example, we have expertise in this building here in things like metadata. And metadata is super important. Metadata, you see companies selling metadata, companies who focus on metadata around videos and songs selling their business to Spotify and Netflix for hundreds of millions of pounds because they're trying to understand better ways to recommend, to keep people in the site. So metadata in academia is the next level of complexity. And so we have to have people in our company working on such specialized areas that they can go and talk and everybody in the company has a baseline of understanding around this. If you're trying to do things a lot more distributed, a lot more outsourced, then that won't work because you'll never have the people who can spend the time to get that into their head because it is drip feeding. I mean, day one of any developer coming to work for us, we have to say to them, just accept the fact that this won't make sense. Academic publishing does not make sense today. It did make sense 50 years ago. And so if you accept that, then you'll find this ride a lot easier and you'll move a lot faster. But it's a very hard thing to grasp, the idea that academia has politics, has these weird incentive workflows, that if you can't explain that to everyone in the team, you're going to build something that's too forward thinking. Yeah, in terms of protection of intellectual property, the concept itself, as I said, many people have come up with before. So if there was a way to protect that, we'd probably be sued. Inadvertently, we were just building on good ideas. But we've got a trademark on the name and the logo, for example. But other than that, there's nothing stopping anyone from building on top of what we've done. And that's actually an important change in, I think, the way that academia and businesses operate. Everything we have, the product itself is built on top of open APIs, and those open APIs are available to everybody. So anybody could come and take all of the data that lives on Figshare and build a clone of it somewhere. They could take every single file, it's all licensed that way, and we'd have no problem with that. If anything, it'd be backing up our site. The things that we do is try and get the credit to the actual researchers themselves, so they feel that if they've got this administrative burden and they want to get more credit, we can keep the administrative burden as low as possible while giving that credit. And if other people copy us, it's like other people copying Facebook, you know? I could build a Facebook. It'd look exactly the same, but no one had used it because there's already people using it and knowing that that's the place to put your data. When it comes to social responsibility, we're working in the public sector. We're working in a space where the things that we are hosting are largely taxpayer funded. So we have an obligation to make that openly available to everybody. And we've lost clients in the past from pushing back on digital rights management, which we don't really want to get into, because having been an academic and then moved out of academia, one thing that happened when I was an academic is I had access to every paper in the world because I went to one of the best schools. And that's great. I had no problems. It wasn't on my radar. As soon as I left academia, I have access to no content. And we've seen it recently with there's a pirate site called Sci-Hub, which is illegally allowing people to download content, and it's getting hundreds of thousands of downloads every day. And so I think when it comes to the ethics around Figshare, a lot of the stuff we do has to be in the best interest of the academic community. You know, this whole idea that knowledge is power, and if you're only allowing the rich people to have the knowledge, then they're going to maintain the power, and we're not going to live in this nice democratic world that the internet is supposed to provide for us. So when it comes to huge changes like Uber have come along, personally, as a user of Uber, I think it's the best thing ever. You know, it does things easier, cheaper, more efficiently, and again, less administrative burden and things like that. So I use it for business. I get a taxi. It comes off my business card, and the email with the receipt gets sent to me. If any other taxi company can provide me that service, brilliant. I have no problems with it. But the idea that you should be able to campaign against those things because they're providing a better service, you're going to lose. And it's not like you're going to get thousands of taxi drivers on the streets in the same way I don't often see many Blockbuster employees on the streets. But the concept around Uber as an organization, because of the size that it's at, it's similar to Apple. It needs to make sure that it's having such a huge global influence and it's controlling so much wealth that they need to make sure that the ways in which they operate are to the highest level of ethics. And the idea that these things like Uber could become a monopoly is a dangerous thing. I wouldn't want Figshare to become a monopoly, so that's another reason why I'm happy for these other platforms that are similar to what we do. Again, I don't think that's safe for academia. And in the same way, I don't think it's safe for things like controlling how you get from one place to the other. In terms of disruption, I think it's a catch-22 again, because the biggest, most disruptive ideas seem the most far-fetched. And so while it's very easy to start a startup these days, I did it part-time while I was a student, it's very difficult to get grand ideas to the level at which they are grand ideas. And so with Figshare, the way that happened was natural. It was the actual service we provide now is we provide infrastructure to university and publishers, and that was never what we set out to do. We set out to be a place where you make content publicly available. The great thing about developing the sustainability model over here with the publishers and the institutions is that we can still stick to the core message and still offer a great free service to any academic anywhere, which was what we set out to do. It's just we do it in a very, in fact, the institutions and things like this mean that it's more powerful. And the idea of talking to funders about this, if you went back 5 years, the idea of getting a funder to use what I was playing around with seems absurd. It seems like a long way to go. And I think persistence in a space is important for that. I think there are ways to do it. There are ways to get to the point where you can explain a concept to people and they'll believe it. A lot of venture capital, particularly in Silicon Valley and stuff like this, they're all about the big ideas now. And Y Combinator is a great example of that, where one of the Y Combinator projects this year is a plane company that flies planes faster than Concorde. You can't start that in your garage. But the idea is that these guys came up with that idea, they thought it out, they came up with business plans, and they proved to somebody who had finance that this is a good idea and this will work. So the idea is one thing, but validating the idea can be done in a few different ways. I think the most disruptive ones are the most difficult ones to get going, unless you can get this gradual kind of pivoting, not even pivoting, just changing what you do slightly in order to support it. And that's what we've done. And the idea that going from not making data available to a place where there's 3 million public data sets on Figshare at the moment is pretty powerful to persuade people to move it to the next level. So if I was to talk to young entrepreneurs, if I was to go back to myself 5 years ago, the biggest thing that I did and the biggest thing that I think people can do is, in order to explain that idea to someone, you need to have a proof of concept. And just about anybody can get a proof of concept going. It doesn't have to be the most professional. It just needs to show that it fills a need and it serves a purpose and people will use it. If you can show that people are using it as well, that's even better. But this whole ideas are cheap. Execution is expensive. So if somebody comes to you with 10 ideas just off the top of their head, that's great. I have friends all the time saying, I thought of that app. And it's like, yeah, but those guys built it. You didn't do anything. You have no claim to that whatsoever. I want flying cars. I'm not going to build a prototype for flying cars. But in terms of a proof of concept, you need to have something which you can take to people and say, this is my idea, this is what it looks like, and this is how it works. Because this is my idea on its own won't work. And if you can get past that and say, this is my idea, this is how it works, and this is how people are using it, and this is how we can see this growing as an idea, then they're already sold a little bit, and then you can build on top of that. And that's what we did, and it doesn't matter if it looks terrible. I was a hacky coder. I am not allowed anywhere near the code base. I can't even log into the GitHub account to control the code base anymore. You hire professionals who will build it properly for you. But the proof of concept is what got people interested and got us people using it and got us to the next stage. So the MVP is very important.